Good evening. I'm going to try to share this on my personal page and with hopes that, let's see if I can do this. Not really sure how, but I know there's a way to do it. Hey there, Sister Stella. I'm trying to figure out how to share this on my personal page, which I'm not really sure I know how to do. Oh, wait. Here we go. I think I got it. Let's see. Glad to see you. Trying to make sure I get this going. Hold on here. Let me see if I got this right, Sister Stella. You're the only one here right now, so I need to see what's going on. This is going to be a little different because it's our first night over here. Hey, sister. Just trying to give people time to get over here to, oh, great. I got it on our, at least I got it. I'm showing it on my personal page too. So now why is this cricket? Hey, Joy, you found me. Yay. I'm hoping that everybody else will find me. I knew what you were trying to say, sister. I knew what you were. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope everybody's doing okay. Just trying to give folks, a little time to get over here. I'm trying to turn this around. Here we go. Trying to get Periscope going. There we go. All right. I think we're all set up. I think I was able to share it on my page so that those of you who would naturally be inclined to go to my page would see it. So hopefully you're there. Hope everybody's had a prosperous and productive week. Hey, Tracy, so far. And we're giving this a shot over here at Bible's Safe House Bay Area, and this is where we'll be housed henceforth and forevermore. And so I hope that you will join me over here as you are tonight. So tonight we're going to talk about the considerations of being heard. The considerations of being heard, and specifically, specifically, the considerations of being heard by God when we are in need of God's ear and attention. And so that is going to be our conversation for tonight. Safe House rocks. Yay, Safe House rocks. I agree with you, sister. Safe House rocks. Did some amazing outreach last Saturday. Just amazing outreach. Just I don't know how often you take time to just count your blessings, but I want to encourage you to count them because they are numerous when we consider those who we choose to serve. Safe House chooses to serve. I just find myself filled with gratitude for what God has allowed me to have and afforded me to have, and not just gratitude, thankful that it's not me, but more gratitude. Okay, God, if I'm here, what is it that you'll have me to do? So just thankful for Safe House and the ministry that it has going forth. So tonight we're going to talk about the considerations of being heard. And, so many of us, my friends, are fortunate, so blessed, really, that we have all five of our senses, right? Most of us have the ability to see and to hear and to smell and to taste and to touch. And it's a blessing. And I suppose that for most of us, we can't appreciate fully how fortunate we are to have them because we've never been without these senses. Even though we have a great empathy, let's say, for those whom we encounter, who may not be able to see. Maybe we know that because they have a service dog or because they're using a cane. Although we may feel sorry for someone that we see that is deaf, right? Because we see them as using sign language. Although themselves, they have embraced this as their normal. We have this level of empathy. I don't believe that we still can fully appreciate how incredibly blessed how incredibly blessed we are to have all 5 of our senses, because we've never had to exist without them, right? It's like we take hearing and tasting and touching and seeing, we take those smelling, we take them for granted, because we've always had them at our disposal, excuse me. And that's a pretty reasonable assumption, I would think, a pretty reasonable assumption that I would say that we take them for granted. And what I was thinking as I was preparing for tonight's Bible study live session is that of the 5 senses, of the 5, there are 2 that I cherish most, and that is the ability to see and the ability to hear. Now, I wish I could say that I could pick one of the 2. One is more important to me than the other, but the truth is they're both equally as important to me, but for different reasons. For me, seeing is important because, among other things, it gives me a sense of freedom, a sense of independence that I don't think I would have without being able to see on my own. I would have to rely on others greatly in order to live my life to the fullest. Now, I'm sure you may have thought that I would say I want to see because I want to see my children and watch and witness them grow. And that is true, my friends. However, for me, seeing is most important to me because of the independence that it affords me, the freedom I'm able to have because of it. And independence and the freedom that it affords me to experience all that I need to experience in this world through sight, and to experience all that I need to experience with regard to my children and their growth. And as a musician, okay, my voice, my instrument of choice, as most of you know, is my voice. You can imagine probably that hearing is as important part of my life, and why the ability to hear is the other sense that I would not want to do without. I love being able to hear the birds chirp in the morning and sing their songs in the mornings. And I love to hear different music and different genres of music. I love hearing the thoughts and ideas of others, and particularly the blossoming ideas that come from my 2 children, who are far more advanced intellectually than I was at their ages. Anybody know that to be true with you, that your kids are like light years ahead of you than they were when you were at their age? I love the convenience of being able to communicate with the other. I love the convenience of being able to communicate through Bible study live with you without having to use an interpreter. Even with you, my friends, I like the freedom of being able to communicate with you by hearing and with my voice. But even for those of us who are not permanently hearing impaired, I see you, sister. There are times for which hearing is impaired. We know that, right? Albeit temporarily, it is sometimes impaired, even for those of us who can hear. For instance, sometimes a cold or a sinus infection will impact our ability to hear, right? Or if you're anything like me, you like dread the descent process when traveling by air, because my ears hurt so bad and they're so clogged that I can't hear anything, and it's so incredibly painful. So there are times, my friends, for which our hearing might be temporarily impaired. And then there are other times, my friends, when there is just no permanent damage or hearing impairment or no temporary loss. It's just that a person is just flat out tuning you out, right? Like my 13-year-old. Ain't nothing medical at all about it. It's just this boy has a tendency to tune me out. Y'all know that I'm trying to work with this teenage boy, and I've been talking to you about trying to help me and to pray me through the infancy of these teenage years, and I can't feel nobody praying for me. I'm gonna need y'all to pray a little bit harder. I'm gonna need you to help your virtual pastor out, because the tune out is the cause for it could cause some real tumultuous times in my home, if you know what I mean. But no, not seriously. There are times when I'm trying to talk to the boy. Okay, let me just bring it here. Whether he's I don't know if it's whether he's watching TV or playing a game or on social media or in a trance, whatever. But I can be right in front of the boy in the room calling his name, and I get no response. Okay, and there is a disrespect going. There's no disrespect going on here. I believe that, because I just don't play that. But Mama Bear just does not play that. But he has an ability to tune me out. I'm sure your kids have an ability to tune you out at times as well, when they deem it necessary. But what is not relevant at the moment for them, they seem to be able to easily tune out. He's got a selective hearing thing going on, my friends. And sometimes the boy just tunes me all the way. And I don't know, maybe he gets tired of hearing me fuss. I don't know, because I do. Because I don't know what causes him to tune me out, but he does. And maybe he doesn't like what I'm about to ask. How was your day? Or how was your homework going? Or whatever. I just don't know. But what I do know is there ain't nothing medical about it, okay? And that the boy tends to tune me out. And I think I'm going to start trying to tune him out too when he needs something from me. How about that? Let's see how that works. So this is how it is. But this idea of hearing, and particularly God hearing us when we make a petition to God, began to intrigue me. Now, we've talked about God taking God's own sweet time to get to us in our times of need. We've talked about that in Bible Study Live before. We've talked about how frustrating it is when we're in the fire and when we're being burned by the fire financially and emotionally, and in some cases even physically. It seems that God is taking God's sweet time to get to us when we are in dire situations. And I don't remember what week it was, but just scroll through Safe House Bay Area Live's Facebook page and you'll find it there, where we talk about how God takes God's sweet time and why and how it happens. And it was a very insightful lesson. So scroll. But for me, I'm like, is God even hearing me sometimes? Okay. Is God even hearing me sometimes? Or have I been tuned out? Is God tuning me out? Is my prayer even making it to God's ears? Even now, I've been praying for months concerning some things related to Safe House. And I'm just wondering, is God even hearing me? Is God even, God, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth, right? I know some of y'all are about to get deep, right? And in your minds, you're like, you got to wait on the Lord, because I can feel it coming. You got to wait on the Lord. You got to wait. Y'all don't think your virtual pastor knows that she has to wait on the Lord already? Yes, I know that. I'm just trying to be transparent with you, and to let you know in this teaching that this is a teaching moment, and that I'm using myself as the example that sometimes I wonder, is God hearing me? Okay? And you can act like that's never been you if you want to, but something about that won't altogether be true. Now, I'm just clear on that, because at some point you have thought, man, is God, can you hear me speaking? Now, I'm clear on that. I'm like, Yento, Papa, can you hear me? Okay? So it made me do what I do when I have these kinds of, epiphanies, I guess. Okay, I need to see what the biblical narrative has to say about this. I want to see what it has to say about the fact that sometimes I'm just like, can you hear me? Are you hearing me, God? And what I discovered tonight, my friends, is enlightening. Okay. All right. And in the remaining moments that we have, I want to share what I gleaned from the biblical narrative with you, because what I discovered is that there are some things that we might need to consider. There are some things that we may need to consider if we are not feeling as if we are being heard by God. There are just some things that you can consider. You don't have to, but you might want to consider these things. I know your super spiritual selves are like, God always hears me, right? God always hears me when I speak and when I cry. But late in the midnight hour, okay, when the tears are saturating the pillow, okay, because the pains of this world are so grave and so great, and it's just you, yourself, and I. You don't have to put on the front for anybody. It's just you and your pillow and your God. And you are honest. And you're like, God, can you hear me? Do you see these tears that are streaming down my face? And you're wondering, God, do you hear me? And I want you to just consider a few things. Just consider a few things. Is that all right? Can we just consider a few things tonight? May I share them with you? I think they will be helpful for you, because they have been helpful for me. Thank you so much for allowing me to share with you tonight. So now let's take a look at the biblical narrative this evening. Let's look through the lens of Hagar. We're going to look through the lens of Hagar tonight, because the question before us tonight is, what must we take into consideration if it is unclear to us if God is hearing our cries and our petitions and our angst? We need to consider. I'm just saying you should consider. I'm not telling you you have to or you must. I'm just saying you might want to consider what I am about to say to you through the biblical narrative when you feel as if your prayers are not, and your petitions and your cries and your moans are not being heard. It is something for you to consider. Okay, so let's look at Genesis, the 21st chapter. We're looking at Genesis, the 21st chapter, which is where we'll find Hagar. And we're going to be going, starting down at the 14th verse. But before we do, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page with regard to the background of this story, right? And I always want to, because I don't know who participates in Bible Study Live over the next days and weeks and months, because it might only be a few of you on here right now. But what I do know is that many people go in the days and weeks after, because they're not able to do so during this hour. And so because I don't know who's watching, I always want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we're all on level playing field. I want to make sure that we have a little background for those of you who are familiar with the story. Just please bear your patience because this is for those who are not. Okay, so you can feel free to chime in and help me tell the story if you want to by typing in how it went. Feel free, but I don't mind you helping me to recount this story. So here we have this man named Abraham, who has this wife named Sarah, right? That's what the Bible tells us leading up to this. They were both up in age, and they didn't have any children. So Sarah had this maid servant named Hagar. And because Sarah couldn't bear any children, right? She gave Hagar to her husband. He went into her, is what the text will tell us. And this was not an unusual phenomenon that a wife would give another woman to their husband. Hagar then conceived a child by Abraham and bore him a son named Ishmael, right? And then these two women did what happens when two women share one man. And sadly, it still continues today. They began to hate on each other. Okay? Hagar taunted Sarah. Sarah gets mad and mistreats her because she had the power to mistreat Hagar. Eventually, though, listen, in her old age, Sarah conceives and bears a child, and his name is Isaac, right? That's what the Bible tells us. And then, she doesn't want Hagar and Ishmael around. That's what the Bible says. Sarah just doesn't want them around anymore. So then Abraham had to go, and he was forced to send them away. Now that's the background of the story. Okay, hang in there, because I need you to get this background so that we can get to the considerations. These considerations are very real. Now that's the background. I think that just about covers it, right? And so, but this is what I want to say real quickly. Two things I want to say really quickly. Just really one thing I want to say really quickly about that, about Abraham. And that is that I want to know how. Okay, now this is another Bible study for you, but this is what how can I get Abraham's type of obedience? This is just an aside. This is not I'm getting to the lesson, but when I think about the fact that Abraham had to go to his son and get rid of him because his wife didn't want him around, and I consider that this happened twice. This is one of two times that Abraham has had to make a choice, had to do away with a child. I'm like, how can I get Abraham's kind of obedience? I just wanted his kind of obedience to rub off on me. You see, this is the first again of two times that Abraham had to compromise the well-being of his son. Sending Ishmael away was no easy task. Sarah said, I don't want him here. It was no easy task. In fact, the Bible says that the matter was very distressing. Verse 11, that the matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. But God God said to Abraham, do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, it says, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring, right? But in the very next chapter, chapter 27, Abraham is told by God, he said, take your son, your only son Isaac, now this is the other boy, whom you loved, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. And without hesitation, my friends, Abraham prepares himself. And for the second time, first Ishmael he had to get rid of. Now this time he had to part ways with his son that he was able to get in his own. And I need to tell you, I'm just wondering, okay, how I can catch hold to some of the Abraham obedience. Now you're like, that's silly. No, I'm really serious. You don't hear me, because it's real dope if you ask me, because how can I say I'm going to take my most prized possession, that which I love most, that degree that I worked for, that business that I longed for, that child that they said I would never have. I'm going to take it, God, in obedience to your will and your way, and I'm going to send it off into the wilderness. I'm going to offer it as a sacrifice to you, just because that's what you told me to do. Just because that's what you told me to do. I'm going to do it anyway. Not once, but I'm going to do it twice. Just because it's just what you said that I needed to do. And guess what? I'm going to do it without question. I'm going to do it without back talk. I'm going to do it without trying to negotiate with you or trying to broker or deal with you. I don't know about you, my friends, but maybe you all have mastered that type of obedience. The obedience by any means necessary. The obedience that hurts initially. The obedience that breaks your heart initially. But this here virtual pastor, she's got some growing to do in this area. She's got some real growing up to do, my friends. And I can keep it really real because obedience doesn't flow off of me like that. It just doesn't. Maybe it does for you, and that's great. That's good, but it ain't always flowing off of me like that. Obedience to God's will, when I know there's potential for me to be inflicted with an insurmountable amount of pain on the front end, it just doesn't so effortlessly come to me as it did for Abraham. So check this out, my friends. This here virtual pastor just flat out envies Abraham's obedience. How many of you can confess that you too are lacking in that type of obedience? If that's you, you just say it's me, but I can tell you that it is me, that kind of obedience, that kind of effortless obedience is the kind of obedience that I envy. And I'm just trying to figure out how I can get it. So that's just an aside, and we're going to talk about that at some point, how he could be so twice, not once, but twice, give up his sons or prepare to give up his sons without a fight. So we're going to talk about that, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm intrigued by Abraham's obedience. So now we pick up at verse 14. Let's talk about it. Verse 14, to discuss chapter 21, Genesis 21, verse 14, to discuss what we are to consider. Remember, this is what we're really talking about tonight. What we are to consider when we are not feeling heard by God, okay? And as always, I'm going to be reading from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. And let me read it. It goes like this. Listen for the word of the Lord. It says, so Abraham rose. Now remember, this is the point where this picks up after Sarah has told Abraham that she wants Ishmael and Hagar gone, right? She wants them gone. This is where it picks up now, okay? And so verse 14, so Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. Hey, Dr. Brown. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, this is what the text says, verse 15, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off. about the distance of a bow shot. And for she said, do not let me look on the death of the child. And as she sat up opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. Verse 17, and God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Okay, come lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him, is what the text says. Verse 19, then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And then it says in verse 20, God was with the boy and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Now, let's unpack this piece by piece. Let's just take a few minutes to unpack this piece by piece, because so many of you are making petitions. Your petitions made known to God. And I know you are. You're weeping before the Lord. Yet you have seen no movement as a result of your prayers. I know I'm not the only, like, you're praying and you're waiting and you haven't seen. And I believe if we consider tonight, we're talking about what to consider. If we can consider the intricacies of these verses that we just read, then I think we'll have a better understanding. I think there are three things. There are three things that I believe we must consider. And I mean earnestly, with sincerity. When we feel like we are not being heard by God, okay? When we are sending up our petitions and our concerns and our prayers and our angst and our issues, and we feel like we are not being heard. And here's the first, okay? Because there are three things that I want us to consider. Again, you don't have to. I'm just saying, you might want to consider when you feel as if God is not hearing you. And here's the first, okay? In the midst of your valley, in the midst of your storm, in the midst of the heat of battle, here it is. What resources are you using that are at your disposal? Listen, essentially, while you are praying and asking God to fix it, because that's what we want him to do, right? We want God to, this is the question. How are you actively participating in turning the valley into a mountain, or calming the storm in your life, or getting victory out of this battle? How are you, my friends, using your resources, your time, your talents, your gifts? How are you exerting your energy when facing your obstacles? What are you doing, my friends? Let's look at this text again, because it says that Abraham gave Hagar and Ishmael some bread and a skin of water and sent them on their way, right? And what Hagar did was, then what? What does the text say? Wandered about the wilderness of Beersheba. Is that what verse 14 tells us? That's what it says. Call it shock, call it disbelief, call it confusion, but it doesn't sound like Hagar made good use of her time when she was thrust into hardship. And I get it. Been there, done that. Here she had all the comforts of a home, with all the food and water that she needed at her disposal. And how she was out now in the wilderness, about to run out of food and water. And it happened because the Bible tells us that she wandered around the wilderness aimlessly. And, she had to know that at some point the food and the water was going to run out. It wasn't going to last forever. She was an Egyptian, right? And what she could have done was found her way back to Egypt so at least she would have access to food. But she didn't. She didn't participate in her own survival. She didn't get savvy about her own issues. Her survival skills didn't kick in. She didn't use the resource of her time, because she had plenty of it to get herself and her son back to a place where they could be taken care of and have access to food. And I get it. Again, I get it. I've been in that place. where I've been thrust into a hardship. I've been thrust into something that I didn't look for, and I just didn't know how to figuring out how to get the heck out of it, how to get out of that thing that I was thrust into in a situation that was beyond it was tough. It was tough to try to even figure out how to. We touched on this last week, though. Watch last week. We touched on this last week in Bible Study Live about how important it is, my friends, and how difficult it is to jumpstart our own healing in life, and especially when you're in the thick of it. But we also talked about, my friends, the necessity of doing it, because it's not it's not good if we don't participate in if we can. Now, again, we're not talking about clinical things. Go watch last week. We're not talking about those who have clinical issues. Clinical issues need to go to see clinicians. That's not what my skill set is. My skill set is to encourage you through the scripture, okay? But I will tell you again, like I told you last week, who has a therapist is Pastor Monica, and who sees her therapist on a regular and consistent basis is Pastor Monica. But so many of you, I mean, but we talked about the necessity of participating in your own healing, in jumpstarting your own situation, because and many of you have lost jobs. Let's see, and you're sitting around waiting for it to another one to just fall in your lap. Beyond sending out a resume or filling out an application, you're doing nothing. You won't even get out there and try to do networking. You won't go to any job fairs. You won't do anything. You got to do something. So many of you have business ideas that have failed not just once or twice, but have failed multiple times. And instead of trying a fourth or fifth time, you decided to sit idly by when expecting God to drop the pre-packaged, ready-made business of your choosing in your lap. And it just doesn't work like that. You got to get out there and see how many times. Get out there and Google it. Google and Siri are our friends, my friends. Get out there and see how many times successful people have failed. The answer is lots. I think they say 90% of only 10% of startup businesses actually thrive, and like 90% of them just don't work. But you don't get to stop. I mean, and I'm telling you what I heard about. I'm not telling you what I heard about. I'm telling you what I have lived through. I'm telling you about, I made the mistake of not using resources available to me once before, and I had no understanding why God wasn't helping me. Okay? But I wasn't helping myself. There was a time that I was in between jobs and I was sending out applications and resume, and beyond that, I wasn't doing nothing, and I just wasted so much time. When I think about the time I wasted, I could have finished my book. You know, when I think about the idle time I sat and waiting and hoping and praying, and when I could have been using my gifts, and God has given them to me, and my talents and my desires to get me out of the dark and awful place that I was in, I just want to kick myself. As with last week, how I just wanted, how was I going to be an active participant in making my situation better? And sometimes when God is silent, my friends, with regard to your prayers, sometimes when God is mute with regard to your requests, sometimes when God is seemingly AWOL in your life, at the very moment you need God most, ask yourself the question. I'm just saying, it's something to consider. What am I doing to participate in making things better for me? Right? What resources am I using? How am I helping myself in this dire situation? What gifts and talents am I sitting on that I could be using to move myself to a better place? I'm just saying that there is something that you have that you can. How am I using my time? Just consider asking yourself that. So when you feel you're not being heard, consider this. What are you doing? How are you participating? What resources are you using while you are asking God to make everything right with you? While you're asking God to fix it for you, what are you doing? What can you do? Hagar walked around in that wilderness, but she had resources. She had Egypt. She could have gone back there, right? But instead, she was praying and asking God to, and I'm not saying you shouldn't pray and ask God. I'm just saying consider when there is no movement, consider what it is that you actively need to do to get you there. That's all I'm saying. Now, here's the second thing that you need to consider when you feel like you are not being heard by God after having been thrust into uncertainty or after being thrust into a hardship. And here it is. How did you participate in getting there? Okay. Not only how you can participate in getting yourself together to get out, but how did you participate? What was your participation in even getting there? Oh boy. I probably just lost a few friends right there. Some of y'all probably just checked out emotionally, mentally. But what did you do to get your own self in this very dire situation that now requires you to weep and moan and pray and cry out loud in such desperation? I know. Nobody really wants to address that, my friends. Nobody really wants to turn inward to see how much of a non-participant you are in making things better, but how you fully have participated in getting you where you are. I'll say it again. Nobody really wants to take the time to see how much of a non-participant you are in making things better, but how fully participated you in, how all the way in you were in getting yourself to where you are. And I'm sorry, but it's true. We refuse to participate in making our lives better, and we refuse to acknowledge how we participated in making our lives such a hot, awful mess. Come on, friends, and let's be honest about this. While we're asking God to fix it, while we're asking God to take God's brush and take a big swoop stroke of miracle of restoration over our lives, while we're asking, consider the role that you, my friends, what role we have played in getting ourselves there. That's all I'm saying, is that you should consider it, because as much as we want to say Sarah was tripping, I'm like, lady, what did you expect to happen when you give your husband to another woman? It's like, what do you expect to happen, okay? Something is going to happen, okay? But as much as Sarah was tripping, okay? As much as Sarah was just a typical jealous woman in that instance, as much that Sarah was insecure and wowing out, as much as we believe that she was just wowing out because of it, as much as we want to say that Sarah was just being whacking and tripping, as much as we want, as the truth is, my friends, that Hagar, over there in chapter 16, had been taunting her. For the Bible tells us in chapter 4 that, in verse 4 of chapter 16, that after Hagar had conceived, she looked with contempt on Sarah. That's what the Bible says, right? And even though this whole idea of Sarah's husband Abraham having a child with Hagar was Sarah's idea, that looking at her with contempt that thing right there, that set Sarah all the way off, okay? And not only that, but Sarah didn't like the way that Ishmael, Hagar's son, was handling her son that God blessed her with, Isaac. So, and he probably learned it, check this out, he probably learned it from Hagar, right? Because he probably learned how to behave from her, which is why you have to watch what you say and what you do around your children. And there is no need for me to lecture you on that, because you already know it, whether you do it or not. But the bottom line is that Hagar was all broken up, right? All distraught in the wilderness about her situation and about the fact that her son was going to die because now there was no food and water and she didn't want to have to see it. Hagar needed to consider what role she played in her family being put out. I'm just saying, she herself had been thrust into the wilderness and she herself had done it by her own deeds, because the truth is that she was an active participant in the hell she now found herself in. And yet, she, like us, expected God to somehow say, how high, when she said jump. Y'all know that's how you treat God, right? That you say how high and God's supposed to, that God is supposed, you know what I'm trying to say, how high and he's supposed to jump, right? And all's I'm saying, and I do mean all's I'm saying, is that when you find yourself thrust into the fire, when you find yourself thrust into the wilderness, when you find yourself thrust into hardship, when you find yourself thrust into struggle, thrust into worry, thrust into anguish, thrust into an awful hot mess, what you need to do in addition to petitioning God is to evaluate what role you played in getting there. It's just that plain and simple. And then maybe, just maybe your weeping about your situation might be turned towards weeping about the dumb stuff you did to get there. I'm just saying, just maybe, if you consider, okay? Maybe if you do some real soul searching, your weeping because of your situation may turn into the weeping about your participation in the situation. That's all I'm saying. And look at this in verse 15. Look at her positioning. Look at her position and the space she tried to put between her and her situation, i.e. her son who was dying, the situation she had a part in participating in. Look, it says in verse 15, when the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under the bushes, right? Under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite of him, a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, do not let me look on the death of the child. As she sat opposite of him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And let me just be really, really super duper whooper clear with you, okay? Let me be real clear, okay? I don't care how far you try to remove yourself from a hardship, okay? I don't care how much you try to separate yourself from a situation, okay? I don't care how emotionally disconnected you try to put, how much emotional distance you try to put between you and your wilderness and you and your issue. It just doesn't absolve you from your role and or your participation in getting there. Period. And we all know those people, or maybe we are those people who think that they are absolved from drama because they are physically removed from it, but they started it, okay? Or absolved from a hardship because they are not in the vicinity of it. And here's the confession time of Pastor Monica. Here's my confession time. It might seem funny, it might seem trivial, but it's my truth. I am the worst at checking my snail mail because in my wacky little mind, if I just don't check the mail, the bills will just go away. I know, that's dumb, right? I know, it's silly, right? But it's true. I know you're like, you don't pay your bills online? I do. But the bills still come in a hard copy, and that's how I know it's time to pay them. And there's something about in the way I'm wired, okay, that says if you don't check the mailbox, you'll just be fine, right? Those bills will magically disappear, right? But can you touch your invisible neighbor and tell him or her that it just don't work like that? It just doesn't work like that. Because no matter how long I delay going to get the mail, no matter how long or how many days or weeks, and sometimes it can be almost a month that it takes between the last time that I went to check the mail. But the truth is, whenever I get there, so will the bills. The bills will be there with or without a late fee. And we going with without, okay? So the logic of physical proximity or emotional proximity, it just doesn't work. Removing oneself physically doesn't negate your role, your participation. It doesn't make you less complicit because you remove yourself from the situation. And the problem is that we think that it does. Like our hands are now clean when they reek with filth and alls. And I do mean alls. I'm trying to say is that you need to consider. You just need to consider what resources that you are utilizing in turning your situation around, but you also need to consider what role you played in getting there. Because 9 out of 10 times, it's significant. I'm just saying. And here's the third thing. Here's the third thing you need to consider. I'm just saying you can consider. You don't have to. Just saying consider it. Okay? Here's the third thing you need to consider when you feel you are not being heard by God. Okay? That is to consider that God just actually may not be hearing you. Okay? Before y'all start typing and trying to get me told, just pause it. Just wait 1 second. Take a deep breath. Everybody woosah. Okay? Because I know I just gave you a big old pill to swallow, suggesting that God just might not be hearing you. Okay? I know y'all saying I done lost it, right? You like, this is my last week with her because she done lost it. Okay? But just hang in, because I just know some of y'all like, this is contrary to every sanctified bone in my body, right? Just breathe it out, breathe it out. I know. Let me get all these scriptures out before you. Matthew 21:22. And this is the boldness we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that he will obtain the request made of him. John 14:4. If in my name you asking me for anything, I will do it, right? Oh, and let's not forget our favorite, Matthew 7:7. Ask and it will be given. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. I know those scriptures too. But there is a reality here, my friends. There is one. And that is that even though Hagar prayed to God and said, do not let me look on the death of my child, even though she sat opposite of him, she lifted up her voice and she wept. Now, none of that compelled God to speak and or move. Yeah. None of that did. Listen to what I extracted. Listen to this of what I extracted from good old Google search. Okay, about hearing. This is what I got from a Google search about hearing. It says about hearing sounds and vibration in hearing. This is what it says. It says that the sound alone means nothing. This right here, you hear that? That means nothing until we hear it. And our brains interpret what it says, what it is. This sound right here means nothing until you hear it, until I hear it, and until the brain interprets what it is. I'm going to say that one thing again. That sound alone means nothing. That sound means nothing until we hear it. Okay? And this is what I want you to understand, because verse 17 tells us that God heard the voice of the boy. And because God heard the voice of the boy, that is when the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and asked her, what's the matter with you? And what I want to say to you is that sometimes, my friends, while you are crying and snotting over your situation, it's your situation, that thing that is causing you anguish, that God actually hears. You don't hear me. It wasn't the cry of Hagar that God heard. It was the cry of the situation, the angst, the hardship, the sadness of this. It was not hate. It was sometimes, my friends, God may not be responding to you, but God will respond to your situation. It's the sound of your situation that is audible and intelligible to God, even though it's making you nuts. It is the sound. It is the sound that God hears of your situation that is igniting something in God to respond, even though your petitions may not seemingly be heard, because there is a reality here. And that is that God didn't seem to be bothered or moved by Hagar's petition, didn't move on her weep. Okay, didn't move on her cry, didn't move on her prayer. And the reason will remain unknown to us, although we have some things that we now can what? Consider as reasons why God did not act upon her request. Right? We have some things that we can consider. We don't know for sure, but we have some things that we can consider. But what we do know is that it wasn't hers that God heard. It wasn't her voice that God, but it was the voice of her situation that he heard. And my friends, I'm so glad. I am so glad to know that when I am in the thick of it, I am so glad to know that when I am in the valley, and in the valley because of my own doing, okay, and when I'm swimming against the current, and when I'm in the wilderness, and when I've run out of all I need and to survive, and when my talents and my gifts get fired up, don't get fired up quickly enough, that stuff is just not going right, and the sound is not. I am so glad to know that God, and with God's loving self, that God, with God's gracious self, that God, with God's merciful self, that God, with God's powerful self, that God, with God's all-knowing self, that God, with God's compassionate self, that God, with God's awesome self, can and will hear the cry of my situation and let me know, as God did with Hagar, that everything is going to be all right. For the Bible says that after God heard the cry of her situation, that God said to her through this angel, do not be afraid. For God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him. Then God opened her eyes, that other sense that I just need in my life. God opened up her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. Isn't it wonderful to know that even if we don't feel or believe that God is hearing us, you, me, our individual, that God is so mindful of us that God is still listening out and can hear. This sound makes sense to God. This sound is being heard by God. It's the sound of angst. It's the sound of stress. It's the sound of trauma. God hears it, and God will act and move on it. Because why? God loves us and God cares for us. God bless you tonight. I hope that you will consider. I hope that you will consider what you are doing to actively get yourself together. I hope that you will consider what you did to actively get yourself there. And I hope that you will consider that God sometimes may not be responding to you, but God will, if God chooses to, will indeed hear the cry of your situation, because sound means nothing until the ear can hear it. Is that clear? I hope so. Let us pray. God, we thank you tonight for your word, and we pray, God, that something has been said and or done to encourage your people to go on a little bit further, to carry on, and to be mindful, and to consider the things that are taking place around why we sometimes feel that you are not hearing us. But God, we thank you for your love and your compassion, that even when we don't feel like we're heard, you're still working it out for our good. You're still seeing about us in the form of our issues and our concerns. And so, God, tonight we lift them all to you. No matter how big or how small they are, we lift them to you. Whether it's financial or physical or emotional, we give them to you. And we trust you, God, because you are the only wise God. You are the ultimate physician. You are the one who heals us emotionally and spiritually and physically. So we give ourselves to you. Tonight, God, I lift up Minister Robin. I believe she's having surgery tomorrow, and I lift her up to you, and I pray for your hands to be upon the hands of the surgeon. And God, whatever they're going in there to do, God, that they will find it and take it out and mend her up, and that her body will fully be restored. I pray for her family as they are preparing to wheel her into surgery. God, I just pray right now for your choice blessings upon every person who is under the sound of my voice now and at a later date. God, just show yourself strong in our lives. We need you as never before, and we trust you to hear the cry. Even when we don't think you're hearing us, we trust you to hear the cry of our situation and to respond. In Jesus' matchless and mighty name we pray, and we give thanks because, God, you are so good and mighty. Thank God and amen. Go in peace, you all. You know what? I check me out. I'm not sure I'll be able to teach next week because I think I have to go be mommy to Kennedy at school. But just be on the lookout, and if not next week, we'll definitely be on the week after. You know, I just don't miss, but except for when it impacts my children. So just be on the lookout. God bless you all for joining me. Carla, I think you're here again this week. I hope to see you when I'm back again. It's so encouraging to see that you joined us for the first time last week and that you thought it right to come back. And God bless you all tonight. And I pray that you all will have a prosperous week. And please keep me in your prayers as I will continue to pray for you. God bless and go in peace. Good night. Rest easy.